Hello and welcome to today's video on question 4 and how the examiners cheat you in this question. In my other videos you'll find out why the examiners need to cheat you and I'm going to show you 6 ways that they try to stop you getting marks so that you can beat the examiner at their own game. So this is what the question looks like. You will always get this made up statement. So I'm using Harry Potter as an example. Hermione makes an odd choice in choosing Ron instead of Harry. To what extent do you agree? In your response, you could write about your own impressions of. These words will always be the same no matter what the question. Evaluate how the writer, blah, 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 and support your opinions with references to the text. Right, well, the first way they try to cheat you is by making this question 4, but it's worth 25% of the whole paper. That's a full quarter of the whole paper, and they ask you to do it when you're already getting knackered. So the obvious thing is to do this question second. Do question 5 first, question 4 second, and that means you'll have done 2 questions and earned 75% of the whole marks of the paper just on those first 2 questions. If you do this in reverse order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as the examiner wants you to do it, you will lose marks guaranteed. So you have to do this paper backwards, and that is my top advice of all time. And number 2 in the ways of cheating you is the word could. The examiner says you could write about these things, but they actually mean must. If you don't write about these things, you will fail. Let's look at the question again to see what I mean. So here's the problem. You could write about how and evaluate how the writer does something. Well, that means you don't have to write about how the writer does something. You don't have to evaluate that at all because you only could do it. Well, it turns out that's a lie. If you don't write about the evaluation, you are capped at half marks in the question. So half of those marks are already disappearing if you don't evaluate. Therefore, could means must. Okay, well, this brings us to number 3. If you are going to evaluate, you have to weigh up 2 sides of a point of view, and therefore you have to partly agree. Well, the question doesn't tell you that you have to partly agree. It asks you to what extent do you agree. So a reasonable person sitting this exam could say, well, I completely agree, or I completely disagree. But that reasonable person will fail the exam because they haven't got something to evaluate then, and they will fail. So the safest option for you is to partly agree. Whether you fully agree or not, you're just going to pretend that you partly agree and say why. The 4th way that you're cheated is this use of the word could again, telling you that you could quote and have references to the text, but obviously you must. So bear in mind you must quote in this. The 5th way that you're cheated is that the examiner asks you to write about how the writer does something. But when the examiner asks you to do that, what they mean is explain the methods. But the word methods never turns up in the question. And if we go to the question, you'll see, even worse, the word how only appears as one of these bullet points that you could ignore. So the question definitely should say, evaluate how the writer's methods does blah, blah, blah. But the examiner won't do that because they want you to do badly in this question. And then we have the final way. So when the examiner wants you to write about how, which means to write about the methods, they do have methods in mind. And the methods that get you into grade 8 and grade 9 are writing about the use of contrast and writing about the narrative voice. And it's very likely that your teachers, from their knowledge of previous exams, have been using a mnemonic like this one, SOAPAIMS, which means write about simile, onomatopoeia, alliteration, including sibilants, personification, adjectives and adverbs, imagery, which is a bit of a cheat because all these are examples of imagery, metaphor and simile. And of course, you should write about these when you come across them. Okay, you will come across some of these, but not all of them. However, you will always come across contrast in the exam, so you must always write about it. And there will always be narrative voice, the point of view of the author or the character speaking, either of those two. And you must write about those in order to get the marks in this question. Yep, so those two are compulsory. They show how brilliant you are, and that's why the examiner doesn't tell you to write about these, because they need enough students not to be brilliant. So there you have it. That is how to get over the examiner's cheats. If you want to know more, don't forget to subscribe, and good luck in your mocks.